The future of immigration in America. What comes next as the situation at the border worsens? Gaining ground in a crowded field. The rise of Pete Buttigieg as a Democratic presidential hopeful. And as pro-life laws move forward, advocates prepare for court battles in opposition. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Stalemate on border security. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. 100 days into this congressional session, then lawmakers still have yet to make any real progress on the immigration crisis.
But now it looks like there's a new push to get something done. CBN News Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson has our top story tonight and joins us from Capitol Hill. Abigail?
That's right, John and Jenna. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says it's time for a bipartisan agreement that resolves immigration and border security problems. But the big obstacle could be the 2020 campaign season. This comes the same day Vice President Mike Pence made a similar call from the border.
So President Trump and I are calling on the Congress to come together and close the loopholes in our asylum laws, to bring about the changes that allow us to return individuals that are apprehended in this country to their countries in Central America the way that we can today in Mexico.
Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs tells CBN News he supports changes to asylum laws.
The problem is most of those would require legislation to get done, and I think that's carrying a big rock up a steep hill.
But also wants to see fencing and walls in appropriate places and the amnesty issue addressed.
We have got to have help from Mexico because it used to be mostly Mexicans, Mexican nationals coming across. That's not the case anymore. Now it's mostly Central American people and other nationalities coming across.
He suggests President Trump leverage his authority by freezing remittance payments to Mexico.
Those transfer payments are about $30 billion a year. If he freezes those for a short period of time, he can get the leverage I think he needs for Mexico to say, we'll sign an international protocol like Canada has done, where Mexico can actually help us with the amnesty issue.
Biggs plans to take a congressional delegation to the border next week.
We'll see how it works, and we'll see how it doesn't work.
And he's not the only doubter that Congress can reach an agreement.
I don't think we're going to get immigration reform done because I think Democrats now forgot about what they were for just a few years ago, and they calculated politically that they're better off having the status quo or even worse.
Like criminal justice reform, Braun believes Congress will only act when the issue is so broken they can't ignore it anymore.
It is as complicated as most other things the federal government is involved with. It gets too far down the trail to where it's close to a calamity or a disaster.
For decades, Congress has failed to approve sweeping immigration reform, and passing a deal will only get more challenging the closer we get to the 2020 election.
Abigail, President Trump, he also made some news today over a controversial plan about what to do with immigrants. What can you tell us about that?
Well, President Trump tweeted, due to the fact that Democrats are unwilling to change our very dangerous immigration laws, we are giving strong considerations to placing illegal immigrants in sanctuary cities. And then he added on top of that, that the radical left always seems to have an open borders, open arms policy, so this should make them very happy. Well, frankly, I think right now a lot of Republican congressmen in the House and Senate are glad that they are officially out of session so they don't have to be chased down by reporters on the Hill to answer questions on this. But as far as President Trump's comments that the radical left will like this, Speaker Pelosi has been quick to comment on this, saying that she does not agree with this whatsoever. She thinks the idea is disrespectful and unworthy of the presidency. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer echoed a similar sentiment, saying that it's very unfortunate and to be condemned. We'll see if Republicans start chiming in on this idea as well. What we do know is that when we first heard about this, when reports first started coming out about this yesterday, the White House and the administration sent statements to multiple news outlets saying this idea was off the table, and then President Trump tweeted it that it was back on today. today. So it seems like there might be some internal opposition in the White House to this plan.
All right, Abigail Robertson for us on Capitol Hill. Thank you.
Well, President Trump has made it clear immigration will be a top priority in his re-election campaign. So far, though, critics have blasted the president's plans. Meanwhile, few of the 2020 Democratic candidates are focusing on border policy. Of all the announced candidates, only Castro has proposed his own immigration reform plan. Speaking at a rally, the former San Antonio mayor challenged his fellow candidates, saying, "We know that this is the issue that this president has made front and center in his campaign. So why wouldn't every candidate have an immigration plan?"
A long shot candidate for 2020 is steadily climbing in the polls. Mayor Pete Buttigieg is set to officially announce his candidacy for president this Sunday. The latest Monmouth University poll shows the South Bend mayor has risen to third place at 9% among Iowa caucus goers, behind former Vice President Joe Biden, who still has yet to announce, at 27%, and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders at 16%.
I'm here to make the case that a millennial Midwestern mayor might be exactly what we need.
If elected, the 37-year-old South Bend mayor would beat out Teddy Roosevelt and JFK as the nation's youngest president.
I have more military experience than anyone to arrive at that desk since George H.W. Bush.
A former intelligence officer and veteran of the war in Afghanistan, Pete Buttigieg is a Rhodes Scholar who speaks 8 languages and is a concert pianist.
When I was younger, I would have done anything to not be gay.
Mayor Pete would also be the first openly gay president.
Your quarrel, sir, is with my creator.
Pitting the freedom of religion against the freedom from discrimination.
And that's the thing I wish the Mike Pences of the world would understand. That if you got a problem with who I am, your problem is not with me.
Buttigieg has made the vice president his #1 target.
I think Pete's quarrels with First Amendment.
As former Indiana governor, Pence worked closely with the mayor of South Bend.
My family and I have a view of marriage that's informed by our faith, and we stand by that. But that doesn't mean that we're critical of anyone else who has a different point of view.
Buttigieg's point of view places himself at the intersection of sexuality and religion.
I'm not critical of his faith. I'm critical of bad policies.
And it's the mayor's policies that will come under the spotlight in a presidential run.
Some people, I think, voted to burn the House down because they'd seen how, for years, Democratic and Republican presidencies produced economic and social and political results that let them down.
Yeah, Buttigieg has defended liberal visions like the Green New Deal and supports a health care public option, and even expanding the Supreme Court to up to 15 members. He's betting his familiarity with upper Rust Belt states President Trump won back in 2016 will give him an edge.
Well, for more now on the South Bend mayor and the rest of the 2020 Democratic pack, we turn to our CBN News chief political analyst, David Brody.
David, this is one poll. Mayor Pete Buttigieg, relatively unknown, just a few months ago. How is this candidate garnering so much attention?
There are a lot of reasons for it. Let's start with authenticity. He's authentic. I mean, he's just pretty much laying it out there. So he's authentic. He communicates well. He's a war veteran. He's from the Midwest. And he has an ability to really put the whole package together. And I think we're seeing that play out. And I think he's going to be around for a while.
It's still early, so how much staying power does Mayor Pete have?
Well, he has passed the entrance exam. It's kind of like the entrance exam to get into college. So he did well on the SAT. Now we find out if the midterm exam, how does that go? And the final exam comes later on in the process. So the questions get harder, the scrutiny gets tighter, the microscope gets larger. And I think when you put all of that together, that's when we'll really have a sense of whether or not he has the toughness for the fight.
Buttigieg, he's openly gay and also openly religious. It does seem, as we mentioned just there, that he's kind of picked a fight with Vice President Pence. How do you see this playing out, David?
Well, I think this is first of all, we don't know. I mean, it's totally unknown. I mean, he's going into uncharted territory. And what I mean by that is that he has been the one to aggressively interject his faith into the national dialogue and the conversation from a Democrat perspective, and we haven't seen that in a while. So I don't know how that's going to play out. I can tell you this, that if he just tries to play to the progressive Christian left, 7%, 8%, the point is it's a small pie. He needs to come into the evangelical, the conservative evangelical sandbox, if you will. and really start playing there and making the case for his compassionate side of his faith in that box, because that's where the voters are, that's where the momentum is, that's where the energy is.
Speaking of embracing faith, we haven't seen anything like this probably since Barack Obama. Do you think that this embrace of faith, has there been any other candidate since Obama up to Buttigieg who's displayed this?
Absolutely not. Obama, and remember back in the day, love your neighbor, right? It was all about compassion. Well, here comes Buttigieg doing the same thing, talking about compassion quite often. Hillary Clinton did not talk about her faith in 2016. It hurt her a lot, for sure, because you win elections on the margins. Pete Buttigieg is trying something different. Let's also remember, Buttigieg is talking about compassion. A lot of the criticism of Donald Trump is that his policies have not been compassionate. I think that might be the way he can interject faith and talk about compassion, the compassion part of the Bible, if you will, but maybe get away from some of the thornier issues that he'll have to confront from a biblical perspective as well.
CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody, thank you.
Thanks, Jenna.
Well, a new law in Ohio bans abortions after an unborn baby's heartbeat is detected. Governor Mike DeWine signed the fetal heartbeat bill into law Thursday. It was a victory pro-life groups had wanted for a long time. But the American Civil Liberties Union of Ohio said it was preparing a constitutional challenge to the law on behalf of 4 abortion clinics in the Buckeye State. The president of Ohio Right to Life says the heartbeat bill is the next incremental step in its strategy to overturn Roe v. Wade. That, of course, is the 1973 Supreme Court decision that legalized abortion nationwide.
Across the country, pro-life legislators are pushing laws they believe courts might well throw out.
Well, it might sound counterintuitive, but as Paul Strand reports from Indiana, legislators there see this as an effort to get the abortion question back in front of the Supreme Court.
Lawmakers like those here in Indiana keep churning out measure after measure to limit abortion, and they keep getting challenged in court. But pro-life forces say the battles are worth it. That's because a case appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court could affect the whole country. One such case, dealing with civil rights, was struck down last year by the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals.
Indiana is actually the only state that's passed a law that protects unborn children based upon their civil rights, that prohibits abortion based upon a child's color of the skin, sex, national origin, disability, or Down syndrome. So the court has never addressed the civil rights of unborn children before. This is historic.
Indiana's lead attorney at the ACLU says that could potentially open the door for states to limit abortions.
The state of Indiana is saying, prior to viability, we have the right to tell you whether or not you can get an abortion. And once you admit that, then there is no limit to how the state can interfere with that right.
And that's the goal of these Indiana legislators, a fundamental change to Roe v. Wade, the ruling that legalized abortion nationwide.
We believe that if they accept this appeal, it's a clear sign that the Supreme Court is willing to reconsider Roe, and we hope that the end of Roe v. Wade comes from Indiana.
The High Court may also take up another state measure.
Indiana's ultrasound law requires that any woman considering an abortion in Indiana must have the opportunity to see an ultrasound of her unborn baby at least 18 hours before she can have an abortion.
Constitutional law attorney Jenna Ellis says that often changes a woman's mind as she sees the baby and hears its heartbeat.
There is still a fundamental conscience that God gives us, and most women can't negate that and suppress it to the point that they're willing to kill their child.
Falk says that's questionable.
Statistics show that most women, when they review the ultrasound, don't change their mind.
While he sees this law as an unnecessary roadblock, Ellis counters that ultrasounds are crucial.
What the founders said in the Declaration was that truth is self-evident, and that's what we see in ultrasounds. We see the self-evident fact that this is a human being.
If the court takes up either measure, it could mean a change in the country's abortion law. Lawmakers continue to try to save as many lives of the unborn as they can here in Indiana, but they also have their eyes on the big picture, hoping to affect abortion nationwide. Paul Strand, CBN News, Indianapolis.
Thanks, Paul. President Trump's pick for the Federal Reserve Board appears to be dead on arrival. Herman Cain has yet to even be nominated, but is already receiving pushback from lawmakers, from Republican lawmakers, that is. For more, we turn now to CBN News White House correspondent Ben Kennedy. Ben, does it look like he'll get through?
Well, John, I'll be honest with you. Things are not looking good for the former presidential candidate. We're, of course, talking about Herman Cain here. He is now expected to withdraw his name for consideration from the Federal Reserve Board. Critics have voiced concerns about past allegations of sexual misconduct. Senator Mitch McConnell said there is a lack of enthusiasm among Republicans to install Cain. To top that, 4 Republican senators have now said they would flat out oppose Kane's appointment.
I was a little concerned when I heard that possibility, that name floated, because of course right away my mind went back in history to his presidential run, which was, cut short because of accusations that were, that he, rather than addressing, he backed out. They are things you cannot ignore, and it causes me pause, so I wouldn't default to a yes, certainly with him.
President Trump said, "I like Herman Cain, and Herman Cain will make that determination on whether to bow out." Again, Cain has not been formally nominated, or Stephen Moore. John, that is Trump's other selection for the Fed.
Well, you just mentioned Moore. Even though Cain looks like he's out, how's Moore's nomination doing?
Well, Moore could face some challenges of his own. In fact, he has some allegations against the IRS. But, John, you got to realize the investigation that these potential nominees face, it's very strict. Essentially, they look at all the allegations. So for Moore, the allegations are against alleged child support payments he did not make, as well as taxes. But we hope to get to the bottom of those things. On Monday, I plan to sit down with Stephen Moore to talk to him about the Fed, among many things, also some taxes. So watch Faith Nation at 6 p.m., John, for that interview, and we'll keep you posted.
I will definitely be watching.
Okay, you'll be here.
Thanks, Ben.
No problem.
A controversial policy takes effect. Up next, the transgender military ban and what it means.
A Trump administration policy restricting military service for transgender people takes effect today.
The policy requires incoming service members to live and serve according to their biological sex. For more, we turn to national security correspondent Eric Phillips. Eric, the policy, of course, has been controversial from the beginning, but now that it's actually in effect, what does it do?
Well, that really depends on who you ask, right? The Pentagon would say the new rules level the playing field, treating gender dysphoria just like any other medical condition that could weaken the effectiveness of the military. They'll tell you it's not a ban on transgender people, but rather closing a gap that never should have existed. Now, the transgender community will tell you that the new measure definitely is one that will make it more difficult for its members to serve in the military, despite many of them serving with dignity and honor for years.
Now, Eric, what about possible exemptions from this policy?
Yeah, there are exemptions, or at the very least, people who will be grandfathered in. There are about 9,000 transgender servicemen and women working in the military right now. Now, some serve in their preferred gender, others are in their biological sex. None of them will be asked to leave the military. That should be well understood. The new policy is for those who are coming in the door and moving from this point forward.
And Eric, this is a reversal from Obama-era policy, right?
Yeah, in many ways it is. Remember, this is really being framed as an issue over gender dysphoria, which is a medical condition where a person is distressed because their biological sex doesn't match the gender with which they identify. It's important to note that not all transgender people have gender dysphoria, but for those who do, under Obama-era legislation, new applicants could serve in their preferred gender or their biological sex if they were deemed medically stable for a period of 18 months. Well, under this new guideline, those with a history of gender dysphoria have to be deemed stable for 36 months. That's quite an increase, and they'll have to serve in their biological sex versus their gender of choice. Another difference is with a history of medical transition treatment, they can still serve under the Obama era. Not so much with this new rule that takes effect today.
And Eric, finally, what about the ongoing court challenges?
Yeah, they're not over yet, just yet, John. And matter of fact, the judge that filed the injunction in the ban last month, allowing the Pentagon to move forward with the policy, well, that was one thing. But now there are 4 outstanding lawsuits still making their way through the courts across the country, with the plaintiffs arguing that the ban is unconstitutional. We're still watching to wait to see how all of that turns out.
CBN's national security correspondent, Eric Phillips. Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
Well, Georgetown University will likely be the first school in the country to require students to pay what's called a reparation fee benefiting descendants of slavery. Students voted overwhelmingly to approve the measure Thursday. It still needs final university approval before going into effect. The measure adds a tuition increase that puts money into a reparations fund. It'll cost students $20.27 per semester. The fund will go toward projects in underprivileged communities where slave descendants now live.
Still ahead, how one group is inspiring Christian women to stand with Israel. The world is seeing a rise in anti-Semitism, including comments from members of Congress right here in Washington.
In light of the current climate, one new group is taking a stand. As Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, their goal is to attract Christian women to stand with Israel.
They call themselves the Alliance of Christian Women for Israel and partner with the Jewish Agency.
It's a global gathering of women from around the world who have a heart for Israel, that want to stand and support the people of God to come back to their ancient homeland. And we just came to Jerusalem for our first launch to find out how we can better, more effectively help.
During their inaugural trip, they received briefings from the Israel Air Force, visited the president's residence, and experienced an absorption center for new immigrants, all to get a first-hand look at today's Israel.
We've seen the need, and you know, the Bible tells us to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. But to me, in the Hebrew mindset of that is there's always action to our prayers. So that's what we want to do.
They also came to experience the land of the Bible.
Oh my gosh, there's so much history and just so much life and love here. You can feel it from the people, you can feel it from the land, the history within the rocks. I mean, it speaks to you. It's amazing.
When you come and set foot here in Jerusalem and the Holy Land is really connecting to the scriptures, and the scripture and the Word of God just comes to life.
And each believe it's a time to stand with Israel.
As Native Americans coming from America, we are so connected with Israel. Everything that we do is kind of correlating with Israel. Our former president, Ben Chalet, was here from Navajo Nation. When he came back, he stood in our pulpit and said, everyone on the Navajo Nation needs to experience Jerusalem. Wow.
What do you think of the idea of more women coming here like this?
Oh, I think it's a must. I think that's how we encounter the Lord, as we open our heart to the place that He loves and invite Him to lead us by His Holy Spirit into an encounter. I hope more women do get to come.
Given today's rhetoric about Israel and the Jewish people, Chavez sees an opportunity.
How important it is, especially now in the movements that are going on around the world with anti-Semitism, that we stand up. We know that we have a biblical mandate as Christians all through the scripture, from Genesis all the way through, to support the people of God.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, the Mount of Olives, Jerusalem.
And for all the latest news from Chris Mitchell and our CBN News team in Israel, check out Jerusalem Dateline. You can find that tonight and every Friday evening at 9:30 Eastern on the CBN News channel.
We will certainly be tuning in.
Of course we will. He does a great job.
Yes, he does. So does all of our team. Well, that is going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation.
Have a great weekend.